Um, this morning, Dirk van Dierendonk told you guys about the importance of humility to effective leadership. And I'm not sure that that's a quality I possess by nature. But now being up on stage here after Freek de Jonge, humility, check. I'm sympathizing with the king now. And I think if you raise the question, so how is it to present if it's not in a language that's not your native language? That's something I can relate to also. And also predicting, it's not ideal, but it's not as bad as presenting after Freek de Jonge. So, thanks for a great presentation. For me to we, for me that is an issue that lies at the essence of organizing. So if you think about why we have organizations, why do organizations exist? The key reason organizations exist is to make possible to do something that you can't do alone. And from that perspective, the key management challenge, the key leadership challenge, wasn't me. The key leadership challenge is to get people to move from me to we. To embrace that purpose for which the organization exists and say, okay, this is something I believe in, this is something I want to work for together with other people to make happen. And in the 15 minutes of fame that I'm allotted today, the key point I want to present to you is that the key of effective management in that sense, the key of effective leadership, is to build a shared sense of purpose, to unite people to achieve that purpose, so to move people from me to we. And to give a little bit of concreteness to that abstract idea, let me talk to you about this company, Patagonia. Patagonia is a company that makes, this morning we had Only the Brave, retail, so we're talking more about retail. Patagonia is a company that makes and sells outdoor apparel. And at a certain point, a couple of years ago, they ran this ad that became really famous. The ad features a picture of their best-selling jacket, or one of their best-selling jackets. And it says, don't buy this jacket. So Patagonia is a for-profit company. So there is something inherently weird about saying, well, you know, what we do is we produce this stuff, we sell it, and here's our best-selling jacket, and we ask you not to buy it. Right? It's unusual. The point here is, Patagonia is very purpose-driven. They are very focused on sustainability. It's about, you know, enjoying the great outdoors, the beauty of the great outdoors, preserving the great outdoors. And their point is, we are opposed to consumerism. We don't want people to buy just for the buying. We want people to buy only what they need. So what they say is, don't buy this jacket, and there's some little print, and it ends with take the pledge. So if you find out what a pledge is, the pledge is essentially about sustainability against consumerism. What they say is, we want you to only buy what you need and to be committed, this is part of the pledge, to keep using that for as long as you can. So if it's still a good jacket, don't get a new one. If something like a zipper breaks down or whatever, we'll help you fix it. That's also what they did. You know, they were driving around the country, driving around the U.S. in vans, helping people fix their gear for free. So this is our part of the pledge. We'll help you do it. If you really want to get rid, if at a certain point you say, I really want to get rid of that jacket, I'm done with it, they'll take it off your hands. Find somebody else who wants it. So if you think about it from the perspective of retail, of business, you say at first blush it's a weird business model. It's a for-profit organization. They manufacture and sell this apparel, but at the same time they say, we want you not to buy unless you really need it. We want you to hold on to it as long as possible. If you're really done holding on to it, we want to bring it to somebody else who's going to use it, so who's not going to buy our stuff. If this didn't make any sense at all, they would be out of business a long time ago already. They're not, they're thriving. Why they're thriving? Because it makes all the sense in the world. The point here is they're driven by a belief, by a certain set of values, by a certain purpose that underlies their business. And what it gets them is really inspired and motivated people. There's plenty of, this is not, and the other thing to notice, this is not inherently there in retail. If you think about retail, you have stories about sweatshops in Bangladesh, child labor in Pakistan, all that kind of stuff. This is not an industry that's inherently good. There's a choice there. So it's not paradise, there's a choice there, but there is a choice there. And their choice is to say, we believe in a certain way of doing business. This is what we're going to do, and it motivates people. It helps them attract good people, retain good people, have inspired people that love working there and make this happen. And it also attracts customers. People like this. There are enough people out there that say, this is what I'm going to buy into. I'd like to take that pledge. I'd rather buy Patagonia gear than gear from a company that is not as driven by those values and that sense of purpose. So in that sense, it's not bad for business. It's not that being purpose-driven, being values-driven is an alternative for profit-driven. The key thing, however, is for a company like Patagonia, profit is in the service of purpose. You need it to be able to pursue your purpose, but it's not a goal in and of itself. So this morning we had Stefano Russo talking about Only the Brave, saying our mission is to be the coolest. And of course you have to make a profit. You can't be the coolest if you can't make a profit, or you can be the coolest for a brief moment and then again you go bankrupt. So you need to be profitable to sustainably be able to be the coolest. But the key thing is, it's about the purpose, and the profit and all the other stuff we do is in the service of that ultimate objective. It's not an objective in and of itself, which I think is critically important because it tells you also that there are more or less appropriate ways of doing things. There are things you shouldn't do because they're inconsistent with your purpose. And if your only driver is the profit itself, or the strategic objectives, or the key performance indicators, or whatever you call it, you get stuff like the financial crisis, where anything goes as long as it serves that particular bottom line. So the key message I would want to present to you guys is the importance and the viability as a business model of being purpose-driven rather than profit-driven, even in for-profit. So what this means from a leadership perspective, you could say the key of effective leadership is uniting people for that purpose, the reason why the organization exists. Because this is where the inspiration comes from. But it has to be values-based. Because the values underlying the purpose are going to tell you why it's meaningful to pursue this purpose, why it's valuable, why it's not just about the company and its shareholders, but why it's also about you working for that company. Why you as an employee working for the company should think, this is what I believe in, this is important and meaningful to me, and I want to make a contribution to making this happen. So from that perspective, the core of effective leadership is building a shared sense of purpose. And it starts already with defining that purpose. It just always reads like by definition. It's a truism. Every single organization exists for a purpose. That doesn't mean it's always clear to people, even the people running the company, what that purpose is. So if you talk to people in an organization, they all know what they do. They have all kinds of sense of, strategic objectives, business models, key performance indicators, profit, blah, blah, blah. They're not necessarily able to clearly articulate what the purpose of the company is. So quite often in my experience, also working with stuff like this in executive education, etc., my experience is this leadership challenge often starts with people being able to articulate what the purpose, define and articulate the purpose. So our first step of this kind of leadership, the notion of building shared purpose, is being able to clearly articulate and define that purpose. The second step is being able to convincingly, persuasively, compellingly communicate this. So this is what we're about, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and this is why it's important. And this is an invitation to you to share in this, to also be motivated by this, to believe in this. And this is where the values come in. As I said earlier, the values are, in a sense, what explains why what you're doing is important and meaningful. Without the values, that's not an explanation. The values are also the core anchor that allow you to make it a shared purpose. Because ultimately, you don't want to have a situation where you are able to you are the CEO, and you're able to articulate the company's purpose, and you're able to articulate it well. You can tell its story. It's you up on your soapbox, and you tell the story, and everybody says, "Wow, great speech." But what do I care? The values also help you explain to people, this is why you care. Because it's also about what you value. That you share that purpose might not be so obvious to people, but you share those values, that will be a lot more obvious to people. So the shared values also help you build that connection. The other thing that's really important here, if you're going to get up on your soapbox, I think it's good to get up on your soapbox. The only thing you do is get up on your soapbox, and it's one-way communication. You won't get to people. It needs to be a dialogue. It needs to be a conversation where you share your understanding of why the company exists and why it does what it does and why it's important. But you also talk about it. You also have a conversation. You're open to other people's ideas. You answer questions, etc., etc. Because that's how you create the buy-in and the sharedness of that purpose. However, and now I'm also, again, going back to Dirk van Dierenonk. Dirk van Dierenonk this morning talked about empowerment. Empowerment is also really important here. If you have shared purpose, if you're able to convey the shared sense of purpose, shared values, and you're able to explain to people in a way that convinces them why you're doing what you're doing is important. But that's all you do. There is the risk that you inspire people in a sense in a way that you don't want. You inspire them to become the willing executioners of your ideas. They say, wow, this is great. Tell me what to do. Essentially, they're outsourcing their thinking to you. I'm really inspired by your vision. Just tell me what to do and I'll work for it. Which is not what you want. Because you want people to think for themselves. You want them to be proactive, to mobilize their own energy and skills and talents and thinking, etc. Rather than to only do what you can think of, right? So to make it work, you need shared purpose, but you also need empowerment, is one way of saying it. My preferred way of saying it is shared leadership. You need to really make clear that you're doing it together, also in terms of sharing responsibility for what you're doing. So shared leadership is about sharing responsibility, but it's also very much about coaching and developing people to take on that responsibility. So it's not just saying, well, there's certain stuff that you can figure out for yourself, so you just go off and do it. That essentially is disengagement. You're really engaging with people to say, okay, if this anyway is challenging to you, let's talk through it. I'll work with you, but I want you to be in the driver's seat, not me. So it's a very active way of leading to get people to be more proactive. And it's important because that's how you prevent them to, in a sense, outsource your thinking, their thinking to you. You want them to be proactive, to think for themselves. But it also creates a sense of psychological ownership. It gets to the place where people say, this is what I believe in, and I'm making the choice to do this, and I'm making the choice to do it in a certain way, rather than just following your orders. So it's really what I believe in the way I believe it should be done. What's also really important here is a key thing, and I think it really connects also with the way Freek talked about trust, psychological safety. If you're going to share the leadership, it means that there should be an opportunity for disagreement. It means that there's the possibility and the reality that not everybody sees things in the exact same way. If this is not possible, that's the end of shared leadership. And I think many people have had this experience where you work with a boss and then the boss says, I'm open to disagreement. You can say anything to me. Up to the point that you actually do it. And then it's not. That was not how it was supposed to be. The idea was nice, but you were actually not supposed to disagree with this person. So the way, and that's the end of psychological safety. So the only way this can work is if you're really open to disagreement. And you can work with disagreement, you can try to create synergy rather than in the end turn it into a situation where people aren't supposed to follow your orders. Psychological safety is also really important when you talk about development. Because part of what you want, if you're pursuing a purpose, you want people to get better at stuff, to be creative, to learn stuff, to have a growth mindset in Dweck's words. And that also requires psychological safety because it means that if you're trying stuff, sometimes it doesn't work. You try something new and you mess up. If you're never allowed to make a mistake, if you're never allowed to make a mess of it, you only take baby steps or you take no steps at all. You don't learn. So psychological safety is important there in two ways. At the same time, you can also say, if you only have this notion, are you aware of the expression herding cats? Think of what it would mean to herd cats. If you know anything about cats, think of what it would mean to try to herd cats. It's not going to work. They're going to go all directions. So the other thing is also just as shared purpose needs shared leadership. To really make it work, it also works the other round. Shared leadership needs shared purpose. If you have shared leadership, if you really empower people to be proactive, but there's no uniting shared purpose, everybody just goes off in their own direction. Everybody follows their own idea of what's best. They all set up their little shops like university, or a hospital, or our consultancy agency. Everybody goes off in their own little direction, doing what they think is best with their own little shop. So it's the combination of these two things that makes for effective leadership. Shared purpose that is values-based, complemented by shared leadership, and both elements are necessary. Final thought here is that everything I just said falls flat on its face if people don't see that you're authentic in this. If people don't see that this is what you really believe in. If this is what you say, but it's not what you do, that's the end of your credibility and that's the end of your leadership. So if you're going to appeal to shared purpose, if you're going to appeal to values, you got to live those values. Thank you.